Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to Pulpit Improv. I am Sasquatch, otherwise known as Gavisas, and thank you all for stopping in today. I'm hoping that I didn't really mean for this to be a continuation of what came up last week. I haven't really intended for anything to be a continuation, just kind of wanted to have a kind of a Bible study going, kind of independent from week to week, but as I was praying and preparing for this week, trying to figure out what I should continue on with, or what I should do, I was actually sitting in my own church service on Wednesday evening, and completely unrelated to what my pastor was preaching on, and I don't remember that as well as I probably should, because I just sat there through most of his message and actually wrote this out for today. My pastor is a fantastic preacher, and from what I do remember him preaching on Wednesday was great. It's just that this was when I feel like God is speaking to me, I try to pay as much attention to that as possible. Even to the exclusion of how he's speaking to me in other ways, like when he's speaking through other people. It's not necessarily the right way to do things, but it's how it works for me, and I feel like I got a good message out of it. So I suppose you all will be the judge of that today. I hope I'm right on this, and I don't really, like I said, not really trying to just do a continuous series. I'm certain at some point we will end things off and go in a different direction, but for right now, we're kind of going to pick up right where we left last week. Last week, if you recall, I was talking about, kind of coming to that point of moving into a new, let me actually bring it up real quick. I was talking about moving into a new realm of working in God, and talked about David and the bear, and how that there's a preparation that comes from just the simple things that we do along the way when we are trying to seek God and to serve God, and that God will put things in our path to show us this. And so today we're actually picking up. We're going to be reading from the book of Joshua, chapter 5, 6, 7, and I believe also a little bit of 8. Yes, a little bit of 8 as well. I'm going to try and condense it as much as possible, or try and edit out as much ancillary information as possible, because there's a lot of information to talk about here. But it's all kind of important, so I'm not really sure what I'm going to be able to cut, what I'm not going to be able to. Hopefully you all won't mind the extensive reading, which is probably going to be happening, and the little bit of my input, which is going to come from this. Anyway, we're going to be starting today in Joshua chapter 5, in verse 13, and I will slow down to read this, although I have a tendency to talk fast. All right. And it says, "It came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him, and said unto him, Art thou for us, or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as captain of the hosts of the Lord am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth, and did worship, and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so." This is going to skip down in chapter 6 to verse 8, because he kind of relates to that to the people, what God said to him. "It came to pass, when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns passed on before the Lord, and blew with the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. And the armed men went before the priests that blew with the trumpets, and the reward came. And the rearward came after the ark, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth, until the day I bid you shout, and then ye shall shout. Or then shall ye shout. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about it once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp." And this goes on for several days, and we all know about this, because this is obviously the story of Joshua at the city of Jericho. And we know how this ends. We know all of this, how this comes about. But there's a couple little things I want to bring out of this story. Because we know that it goes on the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day, and on the seventh day, they compass the city around about 7 times. They can walk all the way around the city 7 times. At the end of the 7th time, they blow the trumpet, and the walls fall down. All these wonderful things happen. But there's a couple things along the line here. Number one, craziest battle plan ever to be devised by anybody. Certainly not man. No human being would ever come up with such a crazy idea to try and take out a city. There's no way that is happening. More so that you'd find, only in the Bible would you find this as being a legitimate and effective battle strategy. Avoiding all of your conventions of wisdom and your gigantic 600,000 man army, which it was, and saying, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to march around the city, and we're going to attack we're not going to attack the pit wall. We're not going to try and knock it down. We're not going to hit it with hammers. We're not going to run it through with, battering rams. We're not going to try and tie ropes around it and drag it into the river. We're not going to do any of that kind of stuff. We're just going to walk around it. When we get to the end, we're going to blow a big trumpet and we're all going to yell really loud, and we're going to hope that something happens. Human intellect does not work that way. We come up with all the crazy battle plans. We'll starve them out. We'll build siege engines. We'll build siege towers. We'll throw big rocks at it. We'll figure a way to get over this wall or through this wall. But God's way is a little bit different from that. And God's way ended up obviously being the correct way, because they took the city without losing a man. And we know this from the scripture. And there's a couple things I want to point out here, particularly some of the extra instructions beyond just march around the city and then yell. In verse 18 of chapter 6 it says, "And ye in any wise keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourselves accursed when ye take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel accursed, and trouble it. But all the silver and gold and vessels of brass and iron are consecrated unto the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord." And so it comes to, he says, everything that's in the city, you have to understand, it's the custom of the time that when you take a city, everything in that city belongs to you. You get to claim it, you get to capture it, your army gets to go in first, they get to plunder whatever they like, they get to take any of the captives that they like, and they get to do whatever they want with them and with that plunder and with that spoil, and they get to build up their own resources rather than staying at home and herding sheep and building and herding cattle and all this kind of stuff, or trying to be a merchant or that way. A very legitimate form of occupation which would provide a very good income by way of this spoil and of this plunder that they could take from other nations. It was considered a very legitimate, very profitable form of occupation to be a soldier. And so it's, again, totally outside the realms of human understanding and human intellect to say, okay, I'm going to take my soldiers and I'm going to send them into that city, and we're going to burn the city to the ground and kill everybody inside, and all the stuff in there that's good, all the cattle, all the sheep, all the oxen, all the gold, all the silver, everything, all the nice clothes and everything like that, everything that would be good that we would normally use to pay our soldiers, we're going to burn it all. And the stuff that we can't burn because of its, because of its chemical makeup, because it's, an element of silver and gold and stuff where we just can't burn it, that stuff we're going to take and we're going to dedicate to the sanctuary of the Lord, and we're not going to give our fighters, our warriors, anything. Totally against human understanding of the time, even probably of today. If craziness happens and, the United States says, okay, well, you know what? We're tired of paying all these high oil prices. We're going to go just take over the entire Middle East. Our whole point of doing that was to get the oil. We're not going to say, okay, now that we've taken over the Middle East, we're going to keep paying high oil prices. We're just going to take the oil. That's just how this works. That's just how it worked back then. If people are going to do something, crazy like that, something stupid like that, then they're going to do it. It's in today's age. Back then, common practice. But nowadays, when we have all these governing rules and governing are a rough idea that we don't really want the headache of taking over that territory and incurring ourselves all the bad publicity and the bad press and the bad relations with all the other nations of the world, because we just don't want to do that. If we have to fight with them, we're going to leave them alone and leave their stuff there and not worry about it. But if for whatever reason we did do that, it's our stuff now. We claim that. You can't just say, okay, well, we're going to go in and take it over and then just ship all the stuff out free, and we're just, because we're such nice people, or we're going to leave it there. No, if we're going to steal this stuff, we're going to use it. Not to say that we're ever going to do that as a country. We would never do that. But I don't think we would do that. Sometimes it's a little bit questionable. But let's just, for the sake of argument, let's say that the United States is never going to invade another country to take their stuff. There are other countries that have. We can see that even within the last 100 years, countries who have said, okay, we want more stuff, so we're going to march in, we're going to take it from you. And when they took it from them, they didn't just leave it there. They didn't pay for it. They just said, it's ours now. We own it. And we own you, the people of this country that we have just taken over. Deal with it or die. Precisely the same sort of mentality was going on back in biblical times. only instead of being considered a reprehensible act, it's just like, hey, this is how things happen. There's in the Bible, it talks about the time of year that kings went out to war. They just did that. It was like the Olympic Games that came up. Hey, it's February the 4th in 3 weeks. It's not actually February the 4th right now. It's February the 17th. But okay, so it's February the 17th. In 3 weeks, we're all going to go out to war. We're going to kill each other. We're going to take land. We're going to conquer cities. Whatever we win, we keep. Whatever you win, you keep. But I'm going to bet that I can take more stuff from you than you can from me. We're going to meet on this field of battle. We're going to fight, and maybe you're going to die, but I'm going to win all the stuff, and I'm going to take it, and I'm going to build up my kingdom with it. And I'm going to pay my soldiers so that they can have that lucrative lifestyle without having to put forth all the effort of, farming and being a merchant, whatever else it is. Other people did that, but for a king, for a kingdom, it was beneficial to have that regular war. Number one, to train your soldiers, to have them, experienced and ready to fight should someone try and attack you, but also so that the people that you were employing as soldiers could just make a living without having to worry about their farm back home and going, man, I hope I can get the crops up in time. Can we kill this guy already and just go back home? You don't want to have them. You don't want to have your soldiers thinking about anything else when they're on the battlefield. Not where I was trying to go with this, but we're here anyway. We're going to go back to where we started. Okay, having thoroughly established that, way more than I needed to, the city of Jericho falls, the walls fall down, the ram's horns are blown, people shout, they go in, they spoil the city, they burn everything to the ground, they throw it in the fire, and they make it pass through, and there's the silver and the gold, and they dedicate that to the temple. And immediately you find obviously it's a great victory. But when you go on directly from here, from the spreading, from just that great moment of just jubilation, exuberance, we beat these guys, the big, powerful, dangerous city of Jericho. Our forces went in, we killed them, we knocked them down, we did great things. Kind of like David did. Hey, you know what? I killed the lion, I killed the bear, I killed Goliath. I did great things. Well, read, if you will, with me, Joshua chapter 7, verses 1 through 5, and find out what happened just immediately after this. In verse 1 it says, "But the children of Israel committed a trespass in the accursed thing. For Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took of the accursed thing, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against the children of Israel." So some guy went up and he said, okay, I'm going to do this my way. I'm going to go in and I'm going to take I'm going to take some of that stuff that I wasn't supposed to. We find out later what it was, but we'll get into that a little bit in a moment. In verse 2 it says, "And Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is beside Bethaven, on the east of Bethel, and spake unto them, saying, Go up and view the country. And the men went up and viewed Ai. And they returned to Joshua and said unto him, Let not all the people go up, but let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up, and smite Ai, and make not all the people to labor thither, for they are but few." So he's saying, okay, Jericho was a problem. We showed up, and there's this huge walled city. We don't know how to get in. We're not really sure how to deal with this. But having now conquered this, we go over here and we see the city of Ai, and there's not a lot there. Couple hundred people, there's not a lot to worry about. They don't have big walls, they don't have a big standing army, they don't have anything that would really frighten or terrify us. We have 600,000 men who are all armed and ready to go over war. Let's just take like 2,000 or 3,000 guys. We can get this. And that's blown. We could probably do it with like 1,000, maybe less. These people are clearly not ready for us. And so it says in verse 4, "So there went up thither of the people about 3,000 men, and they fled before the men of Ai." Oh, wait a second. Joshua, we only need about 3,000 people. Okay, so great. Here's 3,000 people. You go conquer the city. We'll be by in a couple of days to pick up what's left. Okay, great. And they fled before the men of Ai. Well, there's a problem here. If you only need 3,000 people, why are your 3,000 people suddenly running away from this little, podunk town in the middle of nowhere, offset from Jericho, which has already fallen as this great city? "And the men of Ai smote of them about 36 men." No, so not a lot of people died, but people died, which was a lot more than happened in Jericho, and Jericho is this great, big, powerful city, and you got this little podunk town killing your people. Of course people are going to start running away, like, hey, something's wrong here. "For they chased them from before the gate even unto Shebarim, and smote them in the going down, wherefore the hearts of the people melted and became as water. So we have a small problem here. First of all, the people have this great confidence in God, properly so in God. They have great confidence in God. Okay, God, you brought us through. You took us to the doorstep, the very gate of Jericho, this great walled city. You gave us the victory over it. We knocked it down by your power, by your grace, by whatever it is that you did to knock these walls down in front of us. You let us go through. You burned everybody to a man. We, destroyed everything. We consecrated the gold and the silver unto the temple. We glorified you. And now we're going to go and we're going to take on this next little city, which is precisely what we're supposed to be doing here in the first place. We're supposed to be going through and taking the land which you promised our father Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and his seed on down to us. So we're supposed to be here. We're doing what you told us to do. What's wrong? Why can we not make any headway here? We're doing what you told us to go in and take the land. You told us to do that 40 plus years ago. Our forefathers were idiots. They said we're giants in the land. We can't go there because we are as grasshoppers in our own sight before them. And now that we're here, we got that old generation is knocked off, passed away, gone under, kicked the bucket, whatever the case you want, whatever terminology you want to use for that. They're all gone. We're here. We're committed. We're ready. We're trying to follow your will. We're trying to follow your plan. We go up to the city of Ai, which is what you told us to do in the first place. And we're dying. We're literally dying here. What's wrong here? What has gone wrong? How have we erred? And the answer to this is oh so incredibly simple that they missed it. I missed it the first several times I read through this story. And probably a lot of you did too. And it all comes down to what I first read. Joshua chapter 5. Where it says that Joshua, And it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes, and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him, with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him, and said unto him, Art thou for us, or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as captain of the hosts of the Lord am I now come. Before the children of Israel went to Jericho, before the children of Israel enacted that battle plan, before the children of Israel, primed the pumps and got the trumpets ready and got everybody marching around the city, before the people of Israel put the Ark of the Covenant out in front to follow after it as they walked around the city, before they did any of that, they first consulted with God. They first said, okay, God, we have this problem standing in front of us. Israel probably, under its own military might, could have taken that city. 600,000 men armed for war, aged 20 years and upward. They could have gone right up to that city, thrown ropes over the edge, taken them a while. They could have built siege engines. They could have done anything to try and take this city. And they probably could have done it. They could have starved. Remember, I guess the manna did end just before they crossed, or just after they crossed over the Jordan River. But they're in the land now. They could eat of the fruit of the land. It says that they did eat of the fruit of the land, which means they could have laid siege to Jericho for however long it could have taken. A month, 2, 3, 6, 2, 3 years. Some sieges lasted back in those days, until Jericho ran out of food, ran out of money, ran out of something, and was no longer able to sustain itself. And they could have taken the city under their own might. But God said that's not how things are going to happen. I have a better plan. I have a better way for you. If you will obey my word, if you will obey my commandment in this instance, I will give you the victory much faster, much sooner, and with a much less cost of life, a much lower cost of life than you would have been able to obtain on your own. Will you follow my commandment? Will you do the crazy thing? Will you do the stupid thing that I'm about to tell you? And will you see it through to find out if I will be with you as you go forward? And they said, yes, we'll do that. We'll march around this city 13 times. We won't say a word. And when we get to the end, we're going to blow the trumpet and yell real loud. And we're going to hope that happens. And it did. And God said, okay, I will bless you, provided you continue to do things my way. And they said, okay, that's great. And first thing they do is they say, okay, well, God, what do you want us to do next? They say, no. Hey, there's a little town over here. It's so much smaller. We probably don't even have to bother God with asking him how to take this city. We don't even have to bring the whole army down. 2,000-3,000 guys. We'll be good. We don't have to worry about this. Is a tiny little podunk town in the middle of the desert. They got nothing on us. Let's just go take it. and 36 people died. Wouldn't it have been a much more intelligent, much smarter thing to just do precisely what you just did in the place before? Doesn't necessarily mean you have to wait for the angel of the Lord to come show up in bodily form and say, I am the angel of the Lord, captain of the Lord's host and army. Here is the way that you shall go in order to take the city. That's not probably necessary. In fact, it wasn't necessary because we're going to get to that in a second. But rather than do that, they just go, we don't have to work. God is with us. Let's just go. Well, are you sure he is? Are you sure you're doing the right thing? Are you sure that the path that you planned out from here is correct? I want to tell you a little bit of a story about me. This is something I do a lot. 2009, January 2009. I may have actually told this story before at some point, but I don't remember, so I'll do it again. And some of you probably don't want to go back and watch those old videos, and I can totally understand that, because I don't want to watch them either. Ugh. And anyway, so 2009, January, I was standing in my church, and my pastor, who used to be when he was in Bible college, he used to go around as part of a traveling quartet. There's him, a guy who's now a missionary to Scotland, a guy who is a very well-lauded author and apologist for the scripture. I mean, if when I think of the most intelligent person I know in terms of biblicity, this guy is number one. Maybe number two. There's two people who are really, really high. He's like number one and number two, and they're both just about the same. I cannot honestly tell the difference between how smart these two are. The other guy might be a little bit better just because he's able to make things a little bit, very complicated concepts a little bit simpler, but in terms of just raw biblical knowledge, I can't think of anybody else who'd be smarter than him. And then there's this other guy, and I'll tell you his name. His name is Monty Showalter, and he is a missionary someplace. I've forgotten where. I don't know. And Monty Showalter comes to our church, and he's coming, he preached a 3 or 4 day revival. We're all up there and we're praying. And at this particular point in time, I was not particularly, how do I want to say this? Just say it. I was not really living for God. I was going to church. I was showing up. I wasn't really doing anything egregiously bad in terms of, how humans rank sins. That may be a topic for another day. But I was not living a Christian holy lifestyle. I was just kind of doing my own thing, waiting for something else to happen. Basically waiting to leave. If I'm going to be honest with myself and with all of you. I was waiting for an opportunity to leave the church because there was nothing going on there. There was nothing that I was doing. I had felt the call from God years ago, but I hadn't seen anything materialize from that. And so I was not expecting anything to materialize from it. And so it comes on a little bit later on, in the last service, he comes up and he preaches, and it's great and it's awesome. People go up and they start praying, and I go up there to the altar area and I kind of raise my hands. I kind of pretending to pray, like, okay, let's get through this. Jesus, hallelujah, yada, yada, yada. And he comes down off the platform and starts praying for people. And I'm kind of watching him because why would he come pray for me? I don't really know if I'm really believing all this kind of stuff anymore. I don't know if I have any, real stock in what's going on here. And as he's going around and praying, I'm watching him. He's spending, 4 or 5 minutes with everybody, and he's walking around like, okay, well, he'll be here for another 20, 30 minutes, so I just gotta figure out something to pray, whatever. Not paying any attention, not doing what I was supposed to be doing. At this point, he stops praying for a person. He turns around, he looks at me. And as soon as he looks at me, like we lock eyes, he walks right up to me, stands face to face, puts one hand on my shoulder, puts the other finger in my face and says, "You know where you need to be." Takes his hand off my shoulder and walks away. I'm like, in my flesh right now, I'm still like, you couldn't pray for me. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't, I'm like Naaman. You couldn't, I expected him to come, out of the house, strike his hand over the place and, recover the leper. Come on, recover the leper. I'm the leper. Here we go. Come on, pray the sin out of me. Do something. But don't just tell me that I know where I'm supposed to be. But that was exactly what I needed to hear. Because as soon as he said it, everything was re-quickened to my mind. The call from, at that point, 4 or 5 years ago, and exactly what I needed to do to fulfill it. And I was given a choice at that time, and this is something else for another day. I was given a choice, and choice is very, very important from God. It's one of the greatest gifts he ever gave mankind. Also one of the greatest curses, but that's a whole other story. Because we make so many bad decisions. But the choice that I made at the time, obviously, was the right one, because I'm sitting here in front of my computer, yelling at my microphone. Okay, not yelling, but speaking in an excited manner into my microphone, telling you about this experience in a positive light, because that moment changed my life. That moment brought me into a place where I said, okay, I know exactly what I need to do. I stopped pretending to pray. I walked straight across the altar area to where my mother stood. I'm like, hey, I hate to tell you this, but I need to leave the country. And she freaked out a little bit, understandably, because her youngest child has just told her that he's going to leave the country, and that's not something that typically happens ever. And so we had a great time trying to figure that one out. God blessed me. God opened the door for me, and I was able to go to South Africa that year. I went to Madagascar the next year. God was moving. God was, building me up. God was showing me a way forward. 2011 comes. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go someplace this year, and I start setting up my plans. I say, okay, I'm going to go to Japan in 2011. Some of you may not remember this, but in 2011, just a couple months before I was supposed to go there, they had a massive earthquake, which led to a tsunami, which led to the Fukushima reactor dumping like all manner of contaminant and radiation and everything into the land and area around that place. And the people who were organizing the trip said, well, we're not going to take a bunch of college kids over there to glow in the dark, so we're going to cancel that trip. And I said, okay, God, well, I thought you were leading me to this one, but I guess, maybe you're just leading me back to Africa. So within 72 hours, I had canceled that trip. I was booked on another trip. I was going to go to Malawi. And that trip didn't happen. The money was gone. The money that had been there the last 2 years to send me to these far-off places in the world, it dried up and it wasn't there. And I'm like, well, okay, God, maybe I just wasn't supposed to go to Malawi, but there's this Bible college out there in Scotland. I've heard about this Bible college, and it's great. My pastor, another one of those people, the other missionary, not Brother Showalter, but the other one, he runs a Bible college out there in Scotland. I should go there, and then I can learn what I was doing wrong, and I can get this all tied up. And so I'm getting everything signed up. I'm going to go to this Bible college, and I'm going to go to Scotland. I'm going to learn all the things that I don't know. And the very day that I was supposed to go, I was struck with an illness that I didn't recover from for another 2.5 years. And only by the grace of God was I able to recover from that illness. I had a plan, but it wasn't the right plan. It wasn't God's way. It wasn't how God wanted me to do it. It wasn't how God wanted to bring me forward. It was my plan, my understanding, my goal, my reach, my aspiration. And while it's good that my aspiration was to the things of God, it's not how God set it up to be. And God says, okay, we need to pull you back a little bit. We need to slow you down, because the timing, the place, the opportunity, the method of accomplishing this is not right. So you're going to have to slow down. You're going to have to stop. And if you won't, I'll stop you. You see, people think, well, God, why would you do something? Why would you, not that God will hurt you or harm you or anything like that, but sometimes God will allow things to come upon you to teach you something or to slow you down so that you don't hurt yourself more in the future. That's precisely the situation that the children of Israel found themselves in this place, because God was saying, I am the one who is bringing you into this land. You're not coming in by your own power. I promised it to you. You need to trust me. And they said, well, no. You helped us with Jericho, but this little town, we don't need your help with that. We don't even need our full strength. We need less than 0.5% of our full strength to go down and take this city. We don't need anything from you to do this. And God says, good luck. Because I have a plan and I have a purpose and I have a way forward in this, and you have violated that plan by moving forward. And so I'll stop you, and I won't bless you, and I'll let that little tiny podunk city that you're so confident that you can take, I'll let that city bloody your nose. And I'm going to let it break it. I'm going to let you feel the pain of rejection as you have rejected me. And so the children of Israel go to the city of Ai, and they are smitten before them, and they fall back. And it says right there in verse 5 of Joshua chapter 7, wherefore the hearts of the people melted and became as water. Well, God, you gave us this plan. You gave us this purpose. Why aren't you... God, I'm just trying to do what you told me to. I'm just trying to do what you called me to do. I'm just trying to reach forward to the greatness and the kingdom that you have set before me. Just let me do it. But it's not my way. And if it's not my way, I can't bless it. Think of Abraham and Sarah. God gave Abraham and Sarah a promise. I will come, through you will come a promise wherein all nations of the earth will be blessed, and your seed shall be numbered above the stars of heaven, above the sand of the sea. Did you ever realize that promise changed after Ishmael was born? And that's a whole other story. That's a whole other topic for a whole other day. But look it up. That promise from God changes, and it is spoken in a different way every time. From before Ishmael is born to after Ishmael is born, there is a different clause in that promise. Because God said, I will bless the seed of Abraham, but I will not bless all of the seed of Abraham with the promise that comes through Sarah. And that's something that's brought out in Galatians chapter 3, 4, and 5 very, very well, which I won't get into here, but maybe at some point in the future, I'm quite sure I will, because I love to tell that story. But when you take the promise of God and you say, I'm going to do it a different way, I'm not going to, wait for Sarah. She's drying up. She can't have children anymore. God, this is clearly not your will. It must come through someplace else. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do it this way. And God says, I didn't bless that. I didn't tell you to do it that way. I understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to apply man's wisdom to a godly principle and a godly concept. And as much as you're trying to do the right thing, I have to let you know, you have erred in this moment. You have erred in your pursuit of holiness. You have erred in your pursuit of the kingdom and the things of God. I understand you're trying to do well, Abraham. I understand you're trying to do well, Joshua. I understand you're trying to do well, Gavi, and everybody else watching. But it's not my way. It's not how I designed it to be. There's something still you need to learn. There's something still that has to be brought out. There's something that you have not fully grasped yet, which you have not yet fully surrendered to me, which I am trying to enlighten your own eyes to, that I cannot allow you to progress onward until you have come to this realization and come to this knowledge. And so, after striking out on our own, and literally striking out on our own, we come back to the figurative plate and say, okay, God, what do you want me to do? How do I fix the problem? How do I make this right before you? How do I correct the wrong which I have done in trying to step past the bounds of your will? And how do I go forward properly in the right way? And so, in Joshua chapter 7, verse 13, God speaks to Joshua and says, up, sanctify the people, and say, sanctify yourselves against tomorrow. For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, there is an accursed thing in the midst of thee, O Israel. Thou canst not stand before mine enemies until ye take away the accursed thing from among you. In the morning, therefore, ye shall be brought according to your tribes, and it shall be that the tribe which the Lord taketh shall come according to the families thereof, and the family which the Lord shall take shall come by households, and the household which the Lord shall take shall come man by man. And it shall be that he that is taken with the accursed thing shall be burnt with fire, he and all that he hath, because he hath transgressed the covenant of the Lord, because he hath wrought folly in Israel. God says there's something. What you tried to do, what you tried to take. Remember, Achan was one man out of all of Israel. One man out of over 600,000 people. One man out of over 600,000 specific warriors. The one in position to do this sort of thing. And God says, all you have to do is just burn it. And he didn't listen. And so God says, now you must be burnt. Now you must be burnt up in this. Whenever we transgress the plan and the will of God, there is a penalty that comes with that. It's not that God is trying to punish us. It's just that we have stepped outside of the covering of His glory and the covering of His blessing, and we bring upon our own selves a punishment. Not a punishment from God, but a repercussion, a consequence of our actions. People, I'm not going to get into this specifically because I've said it enough this week to other people, but people who smoke can generally not expect a great lifestyle. Number one, it's very expensive. You're going to have a lot less money to work with in terms of just living a good lifestyle, a good productive lifestyle. You're not going to live a long life. I mean, there are some people who are freaks of nature who live to be 120 years old, smoking 4 packs a day. Don't bet on being one of them, because there's only about 1 in 100,000 smokers if they're that lucky. And the people who do experience the immediate repercussions of smoking, the lung disease and the cancer and the tar and the decreased lung capacity, all this kind of stuff, that stuff generally doesn't just go away on its own. Or in most cases, it doesn't go away at all. It hurts people, and it physically damages the body to do so in perpetuity. It's something that there are studies out there that say if you smoke one cigarette, that cigarette can come back and give you cancer 20 years from now. Only because you smoked one cigarette, but because that carcinogen is in there, that little thing that you thought didn't matter, that thing can come back and it can give you cancer, which can kill you in 20 years. And so there's a consequence that comes when we violate the plan and the purpose and the design of God. Not because He wants to do bad things to us, but because of our own because of our own thought of understanding, our own, failure at understanding, we push beyond the limits that He has set forth, and we bring upon ourselves that same thing that we've really feared. What did the children of Israel fear? They feared loss. They feared not having a promised land. They feared not having a homeland again. They feared being wandering in the wilderness for another 40 years. Well, we just need to go and we need to do this. And God says, no, that's not how it happens. And so as a result, they started dying because they wouldn't follow the plan of God. Verse 16 of Joshua chapter 7. So Joshua rose up early in the morning and brought Israel by their tribes, and the tribe of Judah was taken. And he brought the family of Judah, and he took the family of the Zarhites, and he brought the family of the Zarhites man by man, and Zabdi was taken. And he brought his household man by man, and Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was taken. And Joshua said unto Achan, My son, give, I pray thee, glory to the Lord God of Israel, and make confession unto him, and tell me now what thou hast done, hide it not from me. And Achan answered Joshua and said, Indeed, I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and thus have I done. When I saw among the spoils a goodly Babylonish garment, and 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold, of 50 shekels weight, then I coveted them, and took them, and behold, they are hid in the earth in the midst of my tent, and the silver under it. And Joshua sent messengers, and they ran unto the tent, and behold, it was hid in his tent, and the silver under it, and they took them out of the midst of the tent, and brought them unto Joshua, and unto the children of Israel, and laid them out before the Lord. And Joshua and all Israel with them took Achan the son of Zerah, and the silver, and the garment, and the wedge of gold, and his sons, and his daughters, and his oxen, and his asses, his sheep, and his tent, and all that he had, and they brought them unto the valley of Achor. And Joshua said, Why hast thou troubled us? The Lord shall trouble thee this day. And all Israel stoned him with stones, and burned them with fire, after they had stoned them with stones. And they raised over him a great heap of stones unto this day. So the Lord turned from the fierceness of his anger, wherefore the name of that place was called the valley of Achor unto this day. When you transgress the plan of God, when you go against it, it becomes a key point in your life. When you go against it, and when you come back more so into the plan of God, it forever changes something about you. And this is what happened right here. A valley with no name was renamed to account for this transgression. They said, okay, Achan, you've done wrong. There's nothing we can do about that. God has said that the man who transgressed must die. And we've already transgressed and felt his displeasure at that, and the result of his displeasure at that we have no recourse now but to do this. And sometimes it's a hard thing, because in our own life there's stuff that just we don't want to surrender. But God says, I'm not going to take you farther than where you are until this dies. God says, I want you to inherit. I want you to come into the fullness of the call that I placed upon you. I want to see you do great and mighty and wonderful and powerful things. I want to see you overcome the little hurdles in your life. But before you do that, until you surrender, until you submit the smallest thing that you think doesn't matter, until you give that up, I can't bring you into the new place. Until you kill this part of yourself, I cannot move the rest of you forward, because it is a stumbling block, it's a hindrance, and it's an anchor tied in the world. And I'm trying to bring you forward into the kingdom of glory, and you're trying to hold on to this stuff that's completely temporal and useless and harmful and dangerous to you. And I'm trying to show you a better way and show you a better thing, and you're still so wrapped up in it that you can't take one step forward of your own self. And I'm not going to move you, because it will only harm you more in the future. And so we have to kill it, whatever it is. I mean, there's all manner of addiction and sin, and the besetting sin, which is talked about in Hebrews, and the little weights that come upon us. Whatever it is, we have things inside of us that we are holding on to a little too tightly. And God says, you have to release that to me. You have to give that up before I can bless you, before I can bring you into the promised land, before I can give you a home, before I can give you a family, before I can do all these wonderful things. I have to see you give this up first. And when you do, I'll bless it. But until then, we're stuck. And this changing point will not happen, and we will not have that altar to move on into a greater understanding, into a greater relationship. We're not going to have that until this is given up. And in chapter 8, they say, okay, we're going to do it. And so at the end of chapter 7, they kill Achan, they bury him. And in chapter 8, they say, okay, God, we've made our mistakes before. Is there anything else that's left inside of us? In verse 1, it says, and the Lord said unto Joshua, fear not, neither be thou dismayed. Take all the people of war with thee. So we're not going to do this little 3,000 thing. We're not going to, be puffed up and be strong in our own flesh. I'm telling you how this goes. Take all the people of war with thee, and arise, go up to Ai. I have given into thy hand the king of Ai and his people, and his city and his land. And thou shalt do to Ai and her king as thou didst unto Jericho and her king. Only the spoil thereof and the cattle thereof shall ye take for a prey unto yourselves. Lay thee an ambush for the city behind it. He says, okay, I told you to burn everything in Jericho. You didn't do that. Now that you have, I'm going to let you know there was something good, there was something better, there's something greater coming in your future. I just wanted you to give me the first part. Give me this. I didn't tell you that, because God never tells us that. He only wants us to walk by faith, not by sight. And so when we come to that point, it's like, well, if I give this up, I'll never have anything else again. Well, that's not how God works. If you can see it, it's not God's promise. If you can see it coming down the line, it's probably not what you're looking for. If you can feel it, if you can understand, you can have a relationship with God and know so much that as God has promised you, it will come to pass, and you can trust and believe and walk in that and walk with that undoubting. That's something else. But if you can put all the pieces together to say, here's how it's going to happen. If you can look into the future and say, well, I'm going to go to Japan, I'm going to go to Malawi, I'm going to go to Scotland, I'm going to do all these wonderful things, and God's going to bless it, and God says, that's not what I called you to. We need to have this understanding that God's plan is greater than ours. God's understanding is greater than ours. God's desire for us is greater than ours is. We may have the greatest, most powerful desire ever conceived by humankind, and God says, compared to what I have for you, that is nothing. Paul himself said that all my righteousness is as filthy rags. And if there was ever a person, a human being, who would be able to say that they had, a fleshly confidence, Paul was the man. He goes through his accolades time and time again, talking about, he was a Jew of the Jews, a Pharisee of the Pharisees, taught at the feet of Gamaliel, circumcised the 8th day. In terms of all the things that he did of his flesh, there was nobody who had more claim to fame in that than he. But he says that all of his efforts at bringing forward his beliefs at that time, they were nothing. They counted them as dung. Because compared to what God had prepared for him ahead of time and had a plan to do outside of his understanding, he said, this is just nothing at all. I don't even know why I was concerned with this. These things that came before, they're a hindrance to me compared to the glory which God has given to me now. And so, moving on. So Joshua rose and all the people of the war to go up against Ai, and Joshua chose out 30,000 men of valor and sent them away by night. And he commanded them, saying, Behold, ye shall lie in wait against the city, even behind the city. Go not very far from the city, but be ye all ready. And I and all the people that are with me will approach unto the city, and it shall come to pass, when they come out against us, as at the first, that we will flee before them. We're not going to stick around and get killed, but when they come out, we're going to run away. For they will come out after us till we have drawn them from the city. For they will say, They flee before us as at the first. Therefore we will flee before them. Then ye shall rise up from the ambush and seize upon the city, for the Lord your God will deliver it into your hand. And it shall be, when ye have taken the city, that ye shall set the city on fire, according to the commandment of the Lord shall ye do. See, I have commanded you. Joshua therefore sent them forth, and they went to lie in ambush, and abode between Bethel and Ai on the west side of Ai. But Joshua lodged that night among the people. And in verse 14 it says, It came to pass when the king of Ai saw it. I can't jump past that. Darn it. And Joshua rose up early in the morning and numbered the people, and went up he and the elders of Israel before the people of Ai, and all the people, even the people of war that were with him, went up and drew nigh and came before the city, and pitched on the north side of Ai. Now there was a valley between them and Ai. And he took about 5,000 men, and set them to lie in ambush between Bethel and Ai on the west side of the city. And when he had set the people, even all the host that was on the north side of the city, and their liers in wait on the west of the city, Joshua went that night into the midst of the valley. And it came to pass that when the king of Ai saw it, that they hasted and rose up early, and the men of the city went out against Israel to battle, he and all his people, at a time appointed before the plain. But he wist not that there were liers in ambush against him behind the city. And Joshua and all Israel made as if they were beaten before them, and fled by way of the wilderness. And all the people that were in Ai were called together to pursue after them. And they pursued after Joshua, and were drawn away from the city. And there was not a man left in Ai or Bethel that went not out after Israel. And they left the city open, and pursued after Israel. And the Lord said unto Joshua, Stretch out a spear that is in thine hand toward Ai, for I will give it into thine hand. And Joshua stretched out the spear that he had in his hand toward the city. And the ambush arose quickly out of their place, and they ran as soon as he had stretched out his hand, and they entered into the city, and took it, and hasted, and set the city on fire. And I'll leave off from reading there to know just simply this, that when the children of Israel followed God's plan, everything worked out. It wasn't, this lovely, beautiful crafted, I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna make this beautiful oration. I'm not gonna become the pastor of a church overnight. I'm not gonna, start a home Bible study. I'm not gonna start a home missions church. God says, hey, the plans that I have for you are greater than you understand. But the steps to that plan start first with trust. Start first with obedience. Start first with submission. If we're not willing to submit to God in the little things, he will not give into our hands the greater things. We see this time and time again throughout the Gospels. There's multiple different passages about, the 3 servants, and the one who got 1 talent, the one who got 2 talents, the one who got 5 talents. And, they come back, and the one who has 5 says, hey, I got 5 more. And the one says 2, I got 2 more. And the one says, well, I hid it. And God says, well, you weren't faithful with what I gave you. I'm not giving you anything else. And that which you have, I'll give to him which is greater. Enter thou into eternal darkness. There is so much blessing which comes upon us when we will just submit our wills and submit our lives to what God has for us. It's not easy. It's not enjoyable. It's not, it is enjoyable in the long run, but in the moment of decision, it's not enjoyable to the flesh. To the spirit, it is joy, it is life, but to the flesh, it is sorrow, it is corruption, it is death. And it's supposed to be, because our flesh doesn't make it. Our flesh cannot withstand the glory of God. The flesh cannot withstand the plans of God. The flesh cannot stand up and be strong enough to compare with the glory and the greatness and the power of God. That's why we have to stand firm on his promises and say, even though, say like Job, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. Paul said, I die daily. This flesh has to be trodden down. This flesh has to be broken. This flesh has to be, ground to powder if necessary. Because the power and the greatness and the glory of God which can come upon our lives and through our lives is not to be counted worthy of comparison with that which we will leave behind of our flesh. And so I want to inspire you and challenge you. I don't like to use that word challenge so much because it can sometimes come off as negative, but I want to give you a charge. Whatever it is inside you that you don't think, I don't know if I can give this up. I don't know if I can wait. I don't know if I can, be patient. I don't know if I can really surrender this area of my life to God. I don't know if I can really cast all my care upon him. I don't know if I can trust in him to the nth degree to be able to say that whatever it is that God wants me to do, whatever it is that God wants me to give up, I can do that. I don't know if that's me. I challenge you. I charge you. Do that in a moment. People don't make impactful decisions over a long period of time. People make impactful decisions in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. When God spoke to me, when God spoke to you, this brother Monty Showalter, to speak to me and says, hey, you know where you need to be. I didn't have to wait very long for the right answer to come to me to say exactly, I know where I'm supposed to be. But then I stopped consulting. Then I stopped asking God, okay, what's next? Then I stopped asking. I said, well, I just know what's next, okay? I have this other missionary. He's going to come. He's from Japan. I should go to Japan next. Right, wonderful. Oh, well, that's not what God told me to do. God didn't really tell me anything in that regard. Oh, well, God didn't tell me to go to Malawi, but, I really wanted to go. I could have been helpful there. I could have preached. I could have done this. I could have gotten all this wonderful experience. And God says, well, that's not what I called you to. But God, if I go to Scotland, if I go to this Bible college, I will learn how to talk with you better. I'll learn how to hear your voice better. And God says, I don't want you to go someplace to learn something that I can teach you right here. Because I know you better than you know you. And I know how to teach you, and I know how to work with you, and I know how to increase your understanding, increase your knowledge, and increase your trust and dependence on me. I don't need you to be trusting in some man or some organization or some other thing. All I need you to do is trust me. And that's hard. There's a story my pastor tells about a yearly basis that there's this little kid and he's afraid of the dark, and he calls out to his dad, and his dad comes in. He says, what do you want? And he says, I'm scared. I need somebody. He says, well, Jesus is with you. And he says, okay. Dad leaves the room. A couple minutes later, the kid cries out again. The dad comes back, and what do you need? He says, I just need somebody. And he says, well, Jesus is with you. And he says, okay, but I need somebody with skin on. Sometimes we can get so caught up in that idea that we just need somebody with skin on that we don't realize that the power that comes from that person is not of themselves, but is of God. Don't focus on the people around you who are, obviously listen to people who are more spiritually adept than you, who are more spiritually experienced than you, who have greater understanding of the scripture than you do. Listen to them, learn from them, glean from them, but don't count on them to be your only pathway to God. Don't count on me to do that. Please. I'm probably not any more spiritually or scripturally literate than anybody else. I just have learned to trust in some things. I have just learned to look for some things. I've just learned to follow after God in some things that have been a little bit more difficult than I wanted to. Like I said, it's hurtful. It's painful to the flesh to say, okay, God, I'm going to give this up. Okay, God, I'm going to release this. Okay, God, I'm going to give this over to you. But God says, if you will, I will bless it. And the things that will come from it will be greater than the stars of the heaven, will be greater than the sand of the sea, will be the promised land that I've set before you, will be the promise of the ministry that I've put before you, will be the promise of the better life which comes by deference to my word and submission to my will. those things will come if you will just take the first step and submit and give yourself over completely to me. Thank you all so much for listening to this, for trying your hardest, your best, putting forth your best effort to expand your own understanding of God. I understand I am not a good, probably the best person to be listening to on that topic, but because I still have so far to grow. But for those of you who can glean something good from this, I thank you for coming by. I thank you for understanding. And those who are more spiritually adept, please contact with me. Please engage with me so that I too can learn. Not that we should create a system of dependence upon flesh, but that through the iron sharpening iron, as man comes to his brother and sharpens the countenance of his friend, that we might be able to grow together in God. Thank you for coming by. Thank you for listening, for responding, for giving comments, likes, whatever it is. Thank you for that. God be with you. God bless you. I'll see you all figuratively next week. Goodbye.